Thanks. I think the most important thing I want this group to take away from the presentation and from the rest of the day is that Japan has a critical role to play in achieving a data revolution for development. JICA thinks long-term and has long-term partnerships with countries. Japan, through JICA and through is a generous donor, one of the most generous donors in the world, but also through its multilateral partnerships as well. It's going to have a critical role to play. So JICA on its own is going to be an important player in achieving what we're going to be talking about. The second is the great academic institutions here in Japan, and I think Dr. Takeuchi, I think, just demonstrated the importance of the thought leadership that's happening here in Japan. And then finally, the great Japanese companies that we're going to hear later. But I think the most important thing I want you to take away is that Japan's leadership is going to be needed if we're actually going to achieve all of this. So I want you to please take that away from the conversation we're going to have together. I'm very, very grateful to JICA for the 2 years of partnership that we've had together with CSIS. I think you all know I'm Dan Runde. I hold the Schreier Chair at CSIS, but I'm very, very grateful to Dr. Kitano. I want to thank Takeuchi-san and Uematsu-san. I feel like I've been working for Uematsu-san for the last year or so, so thank you. You've been very diligent, working very, very much. So thank you very much, Uematsu-san, for all of your hard work. I'm also very grateful to Era Yagoke, who's here, who did most of the work on writing this really excellent report, but also the very steady and reliable labors of Charles Rice, who just did a really fabulous job. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. And just finally, it's an honor to be with Dr. Haishan Fu and Dr. Wawa Mom in particular, and I'm really looking forward to being on a panel with them. So thank you both for making the long journey. Okay, so we're going to give you some findings here of the report, which is, as you've seen, and you have copies of the report in front of you. Why did we do this? Well, as you've seen, there's 17 goals, 169 sub-indicators. Somebody looked at this and said, uh-oh, how the heck are we going to track all this stuff? And how are we going to actually monitor on a minute by minute? We're going to have to track this stuff, and we're going to also have to measure it in some kind of more effective way. When the MDGs were set up, the Millennium Development Goals, there was not as much thinking about it in the late 90s. They didn't think about tracking this, and so this was one of the things that came up. And my friend Homi Karas at Brookings was the person who wrote the paper that first used the term a data revolution. So there was going to be a need for this. And so thankfully, the other thing that's happened is been the creation of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data, led by Claire Melamed. And if you haven't met Claire Melamed, she's really one of the stars in the UN system in international development. And so I think she's the right person at the right time. And but it's going to require sort of a new partnership. And I think you'll hear that, I think, and you'll see the data, and the information here, but you're going to come away saying, we're going to need new forms of partnership to make this happen. And so I think one of the key things was this. Okay, so what is a data revolution? Well, we use as definition is an unprecedented increase in the volume and types of data and the subsequent demand for them. We've got this ongoing but uneven proliferation of new technologies. We'll talk about the new technologies. And so a revolution is allowing governments, companies, researchers, and citizens to monitor progress and drive action, often with real-time, dynamic, disaggregated data. Let me just add one thing to this definition that I think is very interesting and very important. Two things. First, I think as you move up the curve in development economically, one of the things I've taken away from this exercise is that governments naturally invest more in data. That as you move up from lower income to middle income, it's just a natural, you need more data to be successful. The other thing I took away from this exercise, and this was really something Dr. Mong taught me when I spoke with her in Naypyidaw 6 months ago or so, is that with a democratic government, let me just use UN terms, accountable governance, with increasing accountable governance, the governed and the political leadership demand more data, more rapidly as well. That was there was a before and after moment for me when Dr. Wong said that to me. So as you move up the curve, you're naturally going to invest more in data. But also, the more open your society is, there is a virtuous circle saying, I need more information right now because I'm being held, as a political leader, I'm being held accountable for results. And I need more information to demonstrate that change. Okay, so there are lots of challenges to making this actually happen. The first is you need electricity, you need access to the internet, you need a literate civil service, you need a numerate civil service, you need access to computers, things like digitizing. These are all capacity constraints. We're talking about capacity constraints. So the other thing is, well, what kind of laws do you have for cell phone telephony? Do you have 3G? Do you have 4G? These sorts of things for enabling environment. Data sharing, ownership, and privacy concerns. What are the, do I want my health information, what kind of health information is publicly available and what's not? What kind of questions are being asked? Who owns this data? These are things that have to be worked out as well. And then, so having access to data is a powerful tool for good, but there are also issues of privacy. And obviously, what happens if maybe certain kinds of data might be used in ways that may be used for bad purposes? That's something else you have to think about. Maybe we can talk about that in the panel. Okay. This is what we're going to need is for the SDGs, with 169 sub-indicators is a massive exercise in tracking progress. And it's also going to require finer levels of disaggregating data. That's what this is about, saying if you want to actually track progress on all of this stuff, because actually in many countries there's not actually benchmarking. If you ask of the 200 or so countries, are they currently benchmarked to meet all sort of tracking data? Most of them are not there yet. And so we've got a long way to go. Even this is what was put on the table is in essence aspirational. We're not currently there yet here in 2017. So there's also, and there's a series of, there's a role for governments, there's a role for the private sector, there's a role for civil society, and that's what this concept of top-down and bottom-up interest is about as well. And then a lot of data now isn't about central statistical agencies collecting data, which is something that's gone on since civilization came about in Mesopotamia. But it's also bottom-up data and collecting of data that's happening just through sensors, etc. Okay. So what are some of the technologies? Well, there's certainly satellite technology. You'll see some of that later on. Wearable technology. But I think just cell phone telephony and the data that's being collected on your smartphone, it's just amazing. I mean, you have it. I'm sure, how many of you count the number of steps on your cell phone? Right? Just these sorts of things. And it's constantly tracking information. But also, mobile and smart card technologies have all sorts of uses that are really really quite interesting. So there's been all sorts of breakthroughs that have important uses for achieving the SDGs. Okay. One of the things we talk about in the report is the issue of leapfrog technologies. That there are certain things that what we want to do is that there are certain technologies that are going to allow us to do things. So, for example, if you want to take a census, you don't necessarily have to do the census the way we've done it for the last 100 years. You can use technologies to accommodate new forms of data collection as well. And so we're going to be able to use these new technologies to get information either that in a cheaper and better way, but also in ways that are better or more disaggregated than we have in the past. No, but there's several stages though. One is about laying the foundation for technology adoption. Another one is on capitalizing on the leapfrog technology itself. But then also there's a process of refinement and progression. Okay, and so my colleague is going to present the Laotian Vientiane bus project in more detail, so I'm not going to go into detail here. But I think you're going to find that this is about the use of sensors and on buses, and it's not just about where the bus is on the route. There's also some other uses of the data that's actually far more interesting than whether the bus is coming or not, and I think you'll learn about in my colleague's subsequent presentation. Again, this is similarly, my colleague's going to talk about the RED project in Laos, and this is a partnership with Japan using satellites. So the previous one was about sensors on buses, and this is about satellite technologies and how we're using satellite technologies in ways measuring deforestation and helping governments to make better decisions about combating illegal logging and other things. Okay, this is another case study. We had the privilege of meeting with our friends here in Tokyo and then in Myanmar about the SATREPS project for development of a comprehensive disaster resilience system. The point here is using better data collection and mapping to get better and enhanced government services. This is about using data, capturing data in a number of fronts for a more disaster resilient system and using a collaboration platform to get it. So this is an example here of Japanese cooperation to do that in Myanmar in flood modeling and prevention, infrastructure cataloging, and traffic management particularly. Okay. So, but one of the things you have to do to achieve the data revolution is you need to have there's a certain assumption about capacity to actually achieve a data revolution. So let me come back to my points earlier about numeracy, literacy, using a computer. There are certain basic assumptions. When we went and spoke to, I spoke to dozens of people in Myanmar and Laos. I said, you know what the big data is, which is a term that's often used in the United States? No one had really heard the term. It may be a term that's used by technology companies to sell products, and I don't have anything against big technology companies selling products. I think they should sell as many products as possible. But the fact that it may be something that it isn't there, many countries aren't ready yet today for much of the big data revolution. They're going to need certain kinds of capacities to get there. So let me leave you with the big punchlines of the report. This is the most important slide of my presentation, which is about you cannot fixate on this concept of big data alone. And you want to focus on these foundational skills and foundational capacities. And there's a concept of small data, and we can have a discussion about what does small data mean. For me, when I think about small data, I'm thinking about the foundational capacities to capture data in the first place. You need to get that right. So don't fixate on whiz-bang solutions alone. Don't fixate on the big data, the technologies, the shiny stuff first. You need to think about these other components. We're going to need capacity building. That's what I said earlier. Japan is a world leader in capacity building. We're going to need capacity building to get this data revolution. We need to highlight, share, and support enlightened, government-driven approaches to data. We need to increase funding for the data revolution and coordinate donor efforts. There's no country that can do this alone. We need to coordinate UN data revolution-related activities closely with an expanded GPS-DD. I was talking about this earlier, Claire Melliman's organization. And then we need to secure a consensus on data sharing, ownership, and privacy-related international standards. I can't emphasize this enough, that you need to have a consensus in your society about what's shareable and what's not. I'm going to end it there. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.